11:59 here, folks. We'll open up in this terrible saga. So I think we have David here. Not here yet.
Sorry. Person who want to make you look like me? Never mind. Just pretend you're a beauty pageant lady wearing a sash in a bikini and stilettos, and you want world peace.
Right, folks, we're just waiting on David Shoebridge. He's on his way down now, and we have some esteemed guests here. Scott Ludlam, thank you for coming up. Peter Wish-Wilson, the Greens, and we have Josh Wilson, of course, Andrew Wilkie, and Alicia Payne from the Canberra electorate for the Labor Party as well. Thank you all for coming, and to all our supporters. This is also a very quick announcement, so we didn't have that much. So, coming on 5 years, obviously no one would be after that. And of course, we're all concerned about freedom of the press. And so, hopefully our message gets across to the UK. Obviously, we're disappointed in the leadership of our government that haven't pushed this as hard as we wanted. Just saying enough is not enough. Mr. Albanese should have thumped the table in this case to the Americans and the UK judiciary and the parliamentarians over there. We're supposed to be in an AUKUS arrangement. We're all buddies, but it seems it's very selective. I think Henry Kissinger once said, America doesn't have friends, it has interests. It seems the interest is to suppress a man who has exposed some fairly dark truth on what's happened with the US government. And of course, the highly publicised video that was released on the killings in Iraq of the journalists from Reuters and some other men in a horrendous case which was publicised in the collateral murder video. Rather embarrassing for the US government, but still no excuse for treating Julian as they have to this date. And we're just waiting on David, and he's crossing the road right now. And we also thank again these politicians that made their way to the US last year, a delegation of 5, and I believe we have 63, maybe more, parliamentarians who have signed on to support Julian Assange and wish for his release. So we'll call David Shoebridge up for a jump start, David. So please give a warm welcome to David. He's been a great legend for us here.
Thanks very much, everybody, for turning up today. And I'd like to acknowledge we're gathered on Ngunnawal land, Ngambri land, and pay our collective respects to elders past, present and emerging. And today, of course, is the day of the anniversary of the National Apology, the 16th anniversary. And we said sorry to First Nations people 16 years ago, but of course sorry means you don't do it again, and we have failed in that regard, and we have a huge amount to do with First Nations people, so let's commit to that today on the 16th anniversary of the apology. But we're also just literally days away from a very brave Australian who stood up to some of the most powerful forces on the planet, potentially being whisked away in secrecy to years and years and years in a US high security jail. Julian Assange deserves the solid backing of every politician in this place. And I'm glad to say that there's a growing number of politicians from across the political divide who acknowledge that Julian Assange needs to come home to be with his family and free from jail and free from further persecution. I'm one of 4 co-chairs of the Parliamentary Friends of Assange, and I think it's been a real tribute to that group, to my colleagues from across the political divide, that we've been able to take that message of political unity in this place to Washington, to around the world, to demand that Julian Assange be released. It cannot be a crime to tell the truth. It cannot be a crime to hold power to account. And yet the United States says that its laws can apply to the whole world, regardless of connections with anyone has to the United States, and they reserve the right to pluck anybody anywhere on the planet for spilling the beans on what the United States is doing. And our government should say that is wrong. And our government should back our citizen in and say he should not be just picked up anywhere on the planet and put for a secret trial in the United States. And I'm hopeful that the words we've heard from the Prime Minister and the Opposition Leader will actually result in action. One of the very real concerns we have is that if, and I hope it doesn't happen, if Julian loses this appeal, he may be whisked away in a matter of hours, put on a plane and extradited to the United States. And he has appeal rights to the European Court of Justice. And we will be asking the government to ensure that they speak directly with the United Kingdom, the UK authorities. They speak directly with their counterparts in the UK to ensure that those rights, if that happens, are able to be exercised by Julian Assange. That he's not whisked away in the night with his rights taken from him. But we also make this appeal to the UK Home Secretary to look at the substance of this matter. Look at what some courts have tried to ignore, the very real likelihood that if Julian Assange is extradited to the United States, his health is so much at peril that his life is at stake. Look at the evidence, present the evidence to the courts and make a fair decision on the very real risks that Julian Assange faces with extradition. This is a critical time for whistleblowers. It's a critical time for truth. The US and the UK are persecuting Julian Assange right now for telling the truth. Our own government is trying to put David McBride in jail for telling the truth. We need politicians across the board more than ever to stand up for honesty, stand up for truthfulness, and ensure that no whistleblower goes to jail for letting us know what's going on in this planet. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much, David. David may have to rush. We might get our politicians out here for a photo opportunity if we can, please, because David may have to go. Some of the people attending here are waiting on phone calls from the Parliament to go in for the estimates. So now's the time to get a photo, people. This photo is sponsored by the Skin Cancer Foundation of Australia. Serious face, and we'll have a happy face in a moment. Hopefully you'll be happier next week. All right, thank you folks. Thank you very much.
Craig, while we've got an opportunity, maybe get the 4 co-conveners in a shot as well.
Yeah,
towards
sure.
the front.
Yep, the 4 co-conveners of the Bring Assange Home. And we thank you all again for coming, folks. All right, thank you, people. Just to let you know, my name is Craig Andrews. I'm one of the co-conveners with Marie Ryan for the Alliance Against Political Prosecutions. You can see our sign back here on the right, on the left, on your right. We're representing David McBride, Richard Boyle, Dan Duggan, and of course Julian Assange is the most prolific case that's in the media. And it's not just us people, there are hundreds of thousands of groups around the world protesting regularly for the release and correct treatment of Julian Assange. Now we have a special guest again, Richard Archer from the Liberal Party from Tasmania. Thank you, Richard.
Thank you very much. It's a hard act to follow you, David. I think you said all of the things that we've been saying for some time and that we feel. Thank you to all of you for turning out today in support of Julian Assange and for people right across the country and the world who are growing in number to support Julian and the injustice that continues to be perpetrated for him. It has been over 4,500 days since Julian Assange has enjoyed freedom. At 4,500 days since he has been free. This has gone on long enough. As David has said, he has committed no crime. And if he had committed no crime, he's committed no crime in the United States of America. This is a gross overreach, and it has gone on far too long. There is no good outcome in this situation except for Julian Assange to come home. There is risk in all of these scenarios, being extradited to the United States or continuing to languish in Belmarsh. Neither of those are good outcomes. The only good outcome is for Julian Assange to come home and to be free. And we call on everybody involved in this, politicians at all levels across countries, to do everything they can to stand up and speak out for Julian Assange's freedom and to bring him home.
Thank you very much. Bridget Archer from Tasmania, from the Liberal Party. Our next guest, Josh Wilson from the Labor Party. He represents us in Fremantle, or his electorate, and he's also been on board for the team to bring Assange home. So please welcome Josh Wilson.
Thank you, and it's great to be here on the country of the Ngunnawal and Ngambri people to speak on this important issue and to share the work with my co-conveners, Andrew, Bridget and David. Just to say a few things about what the group has done. We're the co-conveners. There's a significant number of parliamentarians who share this effort. We do that because it reflects the very strong interest in the Australian community to see this injustice end, to see Julian Assange free and returned to Australia. Last year, we were able to convey that message from the Australian community to the American ambassador. We wrote to Congress people in the United States, and that was an open letter co-signed by more than 60 of our fellow parliamentarians, somewhere between a quarter and a third of all Australian parliamentarians making that call, and it was published in the Washington Post. And just recently, we've written to the Home Secretary of the UK to urge them to change their approach, to make sure that they don't accept the assurances of the United States with respect to Julian Assange's well-being, that they form an independent judgment and return to the earlier, I think, without question, correct assessment that it is intolerable from a human rights point of view that Julian Assange be extradited. Just remember, this man has been convicted of no substantial charge. He's been incarcerated for years in a maximum security prison for telling the truth, and not just any truth, but being prepared to hold to account some of the gravest kinds of government decision making and the gravest kinds of the application of state-sponsored military power and violence. We absolutely need to have, as a fundamental principle of Western liberal democracies, the ability to know the truth about that kind of power and to hold that kind of power and those kinds of decisions to account. That's what Julian Assange has done, and there's no way that he should be further persecuted or prosecuted for that. We want to see him come home. So I'm glad to share that work with my co-conveners, lots of members of the Australian Parliament, lots of people in the communities in the United Kingdom and the United States who recognise the important value of press freedom and of whistleblowing and of holding power to account. So we're not alone in making that case. We will continue to make that case in the strongest possible way, joining the position that is now held by the Prime Minister and the Leader of the Opposition, that this cannot go on, following the approach that the Prime Minister has taken in raising this with the US administration at every opportunity, as he has recently said. So finally, thanks to all of the people right across the Australian community who have been lifting their voice and saying that Julian Assange must go free. Thank you.
Thank you, Josh Wilson, ALP member from Western Australia. Now, one man here stands out a bit. He's been a legend in this cause and, of course, for many other great things in this country, and a big supporter of whistleblowers, probably because he used to be one, which may have led him to where he is now as a great advocate for us all, and in this case for Julian Assange. And he was the initiator, I believe, of the group, the parliamentary group to support Julian. Please welcome Andrew Wilkie.
Well, I last saw Julian in person in February 2000, just before COVID, in Belmarsh Prison. And I regret to report that although Julian was putting on a brave face 4 years ago, he was clearly in decline and was clearly suffering greatly from what at that stage had been about 1 year in Belmarsh Prison, following about 7 years in the Ecuadorian embassy. To give you a sense of where he is incarcerated, it's a high security British prison in East London, in the eastern suburbs of London. It's where the worst of the worst, the most dangerous of dangerous, are imprisoned. The afternoon I was there, in fact, a prisoner was murdered by another prisoner in a knifing. It's that kind of place. And here we are 4 years later, and Julian Assange is still rotting in Belmarsh Prison in the eastern suburbs of London. Shame! This is a scandal at every level and a complete failure of governance in the United States, the United Kingdom, and here in Australia. I do not accept that the Australian government has done and is doing everything it humanly can to bust Julian out of Belmarsh. Surely our relationship with the UK and with the United States is strong enough that our Prime Minister can get on the phone to the Prime Minister of the UK, the President of the United States, and say, hey, this has gone on long enough. It's not enough simply to tell the Parliament it's gone on long enough. It's not enough to simply tell the media in Australia it has gone on long enough. Until our Prime Minister tells President Biden it's gone on long enough and we want our boy home, until that happens, then the government has not done everything in its power. Now here we are the week before what might be the final court appearance for Julian in the United Kingdom. Next Tuesday and Wednesday, the 20th and 21st, Tuesday and Wednesday, the 20th and 21st, Julian will front court in London seeking leave one last time to appeal. If he is unsuccessful next week, he could be on an aeroplane to the United States within hours. Literally within hours. The time it takes to drive him from Belmarsh Prison to the airport and to put him on a US government aircraft. The situation is that dire. The need for action is that urgent. Now, I can tell you today that I will go to London next week. I'll be in London for a very short time, less than a day, but I'll be there at the court on the second day of the hearing next Wednesday, because I think it's very important that an Australian parliamentarian and a co-chair of the parliamentary group is there to bear witness. And to support the family, and to stand next to Stella, and to say that she and her husband and her children have the support of almost a third of the Australian Parliament. So even if they've been abandoned by the government, they are not being abandoned by many parliamentarians who understand the injustice of all this. Let's not forget the substantive matter. Julian Assange is a Walkley Award-winning Australian journalist and publisher, and all he did was do his job. And what a chilling signal or message this situation is to every other Australian journalist. Just watch out, because if any foreign government is annoyed by your work, you may well be abandoned by the Australian government and find yourself shipped off to Saudi Arabia or China or who knows where else that the Australian government might be wanting to curry favour with at that particular time. It could be any of us. It could be any of us. I'll leave it at that. You know the story as well as I do. I will be taking next week your best wishes, your strength, your solidarity to London and ensuring that is communicated to Julian. And between now and then, fingers crossed. What we need next week is the British court to see sense, to give Julian leave to appeal, and for the lawyers to go to work and to finally bust him out of Belmarsh. Because until Julian Assange is released from prison, until the extradition is dropped, until he is allowed to come home with his family, if that's his choice, until all of that has happened, then this will remain one of the greatest injustices this country has ever seen.
Andrew Wilkie. I'll just correct what I earlier said, I didn't correct, but add on that Peter Whish-Wilson was also the one of the originators with Andrew to start the group of parliamentarians to support Julian Assange. So we thank Peter, of course, for his great efforts. Thank you. So we're all hoping that Prime Minister Albanese and Penny Wong pick up the phone this week, maybe several times, and not just say enough is enough, because that's not enough. They need to be banging the table, raising their voices. Now's the time for megaphone diplomacy, Mr Albanese. Now we have a special late guest, Scott Ludlam, used to be in the Greens, and he's going to come and say a few words. Scott was in there way before Adam and Eve, I think, supporting Julian, so we really appreciate his effort. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd also just like to acknowledge the sacred ground on which we stand, not so far from the old tent embassy where this all began, and acknowledge the traditional owners of the ground that we're on. I also want to really thank all of you for being here. This is a long fight. I first checked into this one in late 2010, I suspect with many people, with the bombshell revelations in Iraq. Whoa, turn off the microphone. In Iraq, in Afghanistan, revelations about the conduct of US diplomats and really the functioning of empire. We learned so much about how our world works. And instead of focusing on that, we were focused on the character of Julian Assange. They came for the reputations of the people who did this courageous work, and now they've come for their lives. 2 years or so ago, a British court accepted the arguments by Julian's lawyers that he would not survive incarceration in the United States, as so many other people in that horrific prison industrial complex never emerge. A British court accepted that he will not survive incarceration. And now it's right upon us. So I want to thank all of you for being here. If you are down from the Parliamentary Press Gallery, if you've got your yellow lanyard, this is about you. This is not just about Julian, it's about your freedom on either side of the camera to speak truth to power. If you're here as a politician, as a member of the Parliamentary Friends Group, of all the other competing things that you're dealing with in that terrible building, thank you for standing for Julian, because he has nobody else to speak for him. Really, to our colleagues. And lastly, to you, the volunteers, the people who put the event together, the people with the flags, the people with the t-shirts who've been at this for more than a decade, keep standing strong. We're doing this on behalf of a guy who hasn't seen sunlight in years, and he needs us to speak up, particularly in this moment. We have a week to raise the rafters. What we want to see from the Prime Minister is press conferences, calling in the ambassador, as Andrew said, banging the table. This is it, everyone. This is it. This is the moment. So thanks so much for coming out.
Thank you, Scott Ludlam. Now, Peter Whish-Wilson's here, of course, and he's agreed to say a few words. I'll call Peter out. Again, he was one of the co-conveners and the initiators of the parliamentarians to support Julian and to bring him home. Ladies and gentlemen, Peter Whish-Wilson.
Thank you, everyone. In a moment that I got a pretty loud voice, but in a moment that I felt was genuine, when our delegation was over in Washington, I sat next to Kevin Rudd, the Australian ambassador, at a dinner, and he tried to explain to me the politics in the US, and he said, you know, and I actually do feel from the time we spent with Kay Rudd and others over there that there's a genuine attempt to try and free Julian. He said to me, he said, US politics, he said, it's a bit like playing a Rubik's Cube, Peter. He said, just when you think you've got things lined up, another interest surfaces. And it's a very, very complex situation. But we don't have a lot of time. I mean, Julian doesn't have a lot of time. You're here today because you care about Julian, because he's a bloody Aussie hero. In fact, he's a global hero for what he's done, for calling truth to power. we're not just here because we care about Julian and his family, Stella and her beautiful children, his father John, brother Gabrielle, his mother Christine, all the people that we have campaigned with for years. We're here today because we care about telling the truth. How are we going to remember 2024, looking at it now at the beginning of the year? Is it going to be the year of the rise of the demagogue? Trump resurfacing? Mr. Peter Dutton in this place, adopting the same tactics? We're on the edge of a significant conflict in the Middle East that no one seems to want to, in this place and other corridors of power around the world, no one seems to want to step up for peace and find a two-state solution. All the things we've been talking about for years. We're seeing conflict continue between Russia and Ukraine. We're seeing the rise of fascism all around the world. We need Julian freed because we need a truth teller. We need a great truth teller. We need that powerful symbolism that there are people that are willing to be brave and courageous, as Andrew so wonderfully said, and hold truth to power. That's why we need Julian released. And I remain optimistic in my heart that this government at least is making an attempt to release him. I totally agree we need to bang the table, but I'll just leave this thought with you. The previous Prime Minister, Mr. Scott Morrison, he had Mike Pompeo, the head of the CIA that began this whole extradition process. He had him on speed dial. And now he's gone to work with Mike Pompeo over in the US. That shows how close that relationship was between our previous PM and his party that did nothing at all, didn't lift a finger to help Julian Assange. Well, I'm pleased that Bridget and many other LNP MPs and senators have joined the group. And we now have a third of the parliament signed up to free Julian Assange. And I believe there are many others in the parliament from the lobbying we did to get people to sign the letter before we went to Washington also support freeing Julian. And I know that just about every Australian I talk to, and I mean literally everyone, hates this. They see the injustice. They see this as one of the great abuses of power of our time, and they want Julian freed. So thank you for being here today. Thank you for all your years of hard work. And I especially want to pay tribute to Scott Ludlam, who's a good, not just a very, very good man at a time when they're very rare in this day and age, but he's also a very close friend of Julian's. And was an advocate for Julian in this place long before myself and others were. So thanks, Scott, for your continued hard work. And I know you've been over there seeing Julian and Flick, Ruby, who's here as well today, Felicity, all the work you've done. Thank you. And for everyone else here, cheers.
Thank you, Peter. It's Peter Bush-Wilson from the Greens. Folks, next week is the hearing for Julian. It'll be the 20th and the 21st, Tuesday and Wednesday. We will be having an all-day vigil for 2 days at the British High Commission, just down on Commonwealth Avenue. So if you're free, certainly come along any time. Bring a chair and a hat. And we will have speakers on the 20th, I believe, at midday. Is that a correction? 12:30, we'll be having the press there and some key people. I think Bernard Collaery is showing up. We have Amnesty International, and we may have some other local politicians showing up as well. So if you're free, please come on down. We'd like to thank all our politicians who came down. Please give them a big round of applause. We know they're in huge demand and their time is very precious. They don't stop and they get hit on for this kind of thing all the time, but they have made a big effort to come down here and stepping out of Parliament. So we do appreciate that. And thank you to all our supporters and my group, the AAPP, who have been having a vigil nearly every week somewhere. You're more than welcome to join us anytime. We meet on Tuesdays, but there are other groups here as well supporting Julian, Dave McBride, and Richard Boyle in Adelaide, the other whistleblowers, and we have Dan Duggan up in prison in Lithgow, which is another separate kind of a case. So thank you all for coming. We do hope we get good news this week, and we do hope the Albanese government can step up in this last-ditch effort to get Julian released and returned to his family. Thank you. Thank you for coming.
Thank you. Hey, they're stealing the sign. The cops are stealing our sign.
It's not our sign. It's not our sign.
Definitely not our sign. I get very curious.
Well
Thanks for joining us, Diggs. That was a nice little press conference. Thank you so much for staying with us through this. Obviously, we need Julian Freed. We need truth to come out. It's funny when I hear senators and members talking about truths, and a lot of them have covered by all these truths for the last 2 years. We'll keep standing with these people, even when there is pushback. We stand on trying to fight the truth.
Look at the World Commission.
Jeffrey Epstein, a conspiracy theory.
Thank you, Shannon. Doing well, brother. Appreciate it, my friend. Yes.
You know what I know about this one? A bit scary. To know that the government are pedophiles and the police
Right, I am going to end this stream now, guys. Do really appreciate your time. Have a great day. We'll see you tomorrow.
I think I'm a conspiracy theorist.